The fall of Pastor Timothy. In the bustling town of Mbashu, Pastor Timothy was known as a humble man of God. For 5 years, he labored as an assistant pastor in a large evangelical church. Despite his efforts, his life was one of struggle. He barely earned enough to feed his family, and his wife often borrowed money to keep the household running. Timothy grew weary of the constant lack. One evening, he sat under a mango tree, frustrated and questioning his path. How can I serve God faithfully and still live like this? That night, Timothy decided to leave the organization and start his own church. He called it the House of Divine Miracles Ministry. At first, it was small, a simple tent on the edge of town. He preached passionately, and a few people joined him. But the offerings were meager, and Timothy quickly grew desperate. Seeking a solution, he visited Elder Namdi, an old acquaintance known for his ties to spiritual herbalists. Elder, Timothy said, I need help. My church isn't growing, and I can't remain in this poverty. Namdi smirked and led him to a secluded hut in the forest. Inside, a mysterious herbalist handed Timothy a small pouch of powders, instructing him to use it during his prayers. It will bring you power, the herbalist said. But remember, shortcuts come with a price. Timothy dismissed the warning, eager for results. That Sunday, Timothy conducted a special healing service. He sprinkled the powder into a bowl of water, prayed loudly, and declared miracles. A blind man in the congregation suddenly claimed he could see. The crowd erupted in joy, praising Timothy's newfound anointing. Word spread rapidly, and soon, people traveled from neighboring towns to witness the miracles. Timothy's church overflowed with members, and the offerings poured in. He upgraded to a larger building, bought expensive suits, and drove a sleek new car. He bathed in his newfound success, convinced he had finally arrived. But with power came arrogance. Timothy began to exploit his position. He told married women with troubled homes, your husband is blocking your blessings. You need private prayers to break these chains. Under the guise of spiritual deliverance, he seduced many of them. Even members of the choir were not spared, as Timothy used his influence to lure them. He justified his actions, believing his role as the man of God gave him special privileges. The congregation remained unaware of his dark side, as Timothy expertly concealed his deeds. Among the new members of the church were Deborah and her husband, Chijioke. Deborah was beautiful, with a melodious voice that made her a star in the choir. Timothy quickly noticed her and began to devise a plan. One evening after choir practice, he called Deborah aside. The Lord has revealed to me, he began, that your husband is the reason your prayers are not answered. You must trust me for private deliverance. Deborah felt uneasy but pretended to agree. That night, she told Chijioke about the conversation. Chijioke, calm but strategic, said, let him think you've agreed. We will expose him for who he truly is. The next day, Deborah informed Timothy that she was ready for the private prayers. Overjoyed, Timothy suggested they meet at a hotel to avoid suspicion. Meanwhile, Chijioke contacted the local police and explained their plan. On the agreed day, Timothy arrived at the hotel, dressed in his finest suit, exuding confidence. He booked a room and waited. When Deborah arrived, she acted nervous but compliant, playing her part perfectly. Timothy wasted no time, locking the door and beginning to undress. Suddenly, there was a loud knock. Police. Open the door. Timothy froze, his trousers halfway down. The door burst open, and officers stormed in with cameras, capturing the scene. Deborah stepped aside as Chijioke entered the room with a look of triumph. The news spread like wildfire. Timothy was paraded through the streets in handcuffs as furious church members gathered to watch. At the police station, faced with overwhelming evidence, Timothy broke down and confessed. I used charms for fake miracles, he admitted. I exploited women in the name of prayers. I let greed and lust consume me. I betrayed God and my congregation. His shocking confession sent waves through the town, leaving his followers in disbelief. The House of Divine Miracles ministry crumbled. Angry members abandoned the church, and Timothy's once glorious reputation was destroyed. The women he exploited came forward with their stories, and Timothy was sentenced to prison. In his cell, he spent his days writing letters of apology, reflecting on his actions, and seeking forgiveness. Deborah and Chidioke, meanwhile, were hailed as heroes for exposing the pastor's evil deeds. The tale of Pastor Timothy became a cautionary story told across the region. It reminded people that greed and deception, no matter how hidden, would always be uncovered. True success, they learned, comes only through honesty and humility.